A warm welcome, Mr. Munjal. We heard you speaking, and this was quite impressive, and the progress Indian companies are making gives us some hope in these rather grim times. Now, what would you think, given your vast knowledge of the and experience in this sector, do you think the EV industry is transitioning enough to really meet its 206 billion ambitious targets by 2080? No, 2030.
Thank you for having me here. I'm a great proponent, I'm a great believer of electric mobility, and that's something that I've been doing for about 14 odd years now. So I'm an extremely bullish person when it comes to electric vehicles, when it comes to environmental friendly vehicles, zero emission vehicles. I believe that once the change starts, and which has already started, we're already on that high growth mode now. Once it starts at this stage, we are going to see a very, very dramatic change over the next few years. And whatever numbers that we put or project at this point of time, we may just end up surpassing them. That's what I believe. So what is going to happen, the way I see it, there are a number of tailwinds that we already have in this sector. We are seeing the government come out with very strong policies advocating and pushing electric mobility through. We've got various PLI schemes which are already there. We've got the FAME 2 which is there. And then on top of all of that, we've got states which are coming up with their own policies. So all of this basically propels this forward in this whole sector, because the initial problem was your initial purchase price. Now that has come down because of these policies being in place.
Yes, and to accelerate the process. Yes, now if you travel through beautiful India, you see what needs to be done and how big the problem is. So what would it need for the sector to accelerate transition to electricity and EV?
So what we need to do is have long-term goals. Now these long-term goals, I mean, we need to set a cut-off date by which we want to actually convert completely to electric. That's a very, very important one. We've already seen, number of countries, there's about 20 odd countries around the world which have got goals in place which talk about, by which time they want to be completely electric. We've got about 8 odd countries which are talking about complete net zero in the next number of years. Now it could be 2030, it could be 2035 in terms of being net zero, etc. So we need to set goals in place. But while we set these goals in place, we also have to be conscious of the fact that not all product categories will take off at the same time. And the same rule should not apply to all product categories. Now in a country like India, which is a very large two-wheeler market, now two-wheelers could actually form the base of that pyramid. They could be the low-hanging fruit. They could be the ones which could convert first and form the basis which everything else will fall into place. So I think that's a very, very important factor to set the end goal. Now once you have the end date in place, then everything begins to fall in place. Now whether it is your infrastructure, it is your charging infrastructure, it is your supply chains, your dealer network, your government policies and how they're going to move, financing for these vehicles, manufacturing, everything will fall in place once you know where your cutoff date is. If there's no cutoff date, then it's a free flow. Conversion will still happen, but to accelerate it, you need that cutoff date.
Okay, and that cutoff date, did I get you right? That would motivate research and development and in the industries themselves, yes? But first part of the question, now second part, please. Let's stay on the two-wheeler market. What would really be the spark to make it possible on scale?
See, I don't think that's going to really, it's not about creating that R&D, it's not about going for pushing further research, etc. That's already happening. So there's a number of steps which are already being taken at this point of time.
Enough steps?
Lots of good steps, some headwinds as well, but majority tailwinds. Now the headwinds, I would say, like I said, one of them is actually a long-term policy to say by which time we want to convert. The second, there are some factors which are there which are more to do with things like awareness. There is still very low awareness when it comes to electric vehicles and the benefit of electric vehicles for the environment, etc. So that is a non-physical. There are factors, for example, when we look at delivery vehicles being used. Now there could be a nudge or there could be a mandate in that direction to say, why don't you guys start converting to electric? You're right now using old IC engine vehicles. So there are a number of steps which could be taken which would accelerate this whole process.
How important is the price?
Extremely. Now price is a very, very important factor. When we look at India, whether we look at the two-wheelers or we look at the cars or other vehicles, pricing is a very important factor. Whereas it's a balance actually. It's not just about the price, it's also the quality, it's also the durability of the product, it's the value that a person is getting. So price is one factor, it's a value. So it's a value conscious decision that a customer takes. What am I getting? What is the value that I'm getting out of the product? So pricing is important, but it's a value which is more important.
What is your take on government policies for the EV industry? I mean, you had some praise, but I can imagine some things are missing.
See, like I said, there are tailwinds in this space from a governmental policy standpoint. So the government has been supportive of this. There's absolutely no doubt about it. The policy which came out in 2019, which was actually a FAME policy, wasn't a great policy. It had too many complications around it. There were too many angles around the whole policy. That has now been enhanced as of June of this year. So it's become a much more important policy, much better policy. That said, this policy, the push in this sector needs to be a long sustained one. Beyond a certain level, automatically the market forces will take over. But till such time, you really need to handhold this. So government policies are extremely important whenever we are looking at any kind of a shift that's happening. Now we look at, even emission norms. As emission norms are being set around the world by different countries, those are being set by the government to say, this is where we want to be, these are our goals and these are our targets. And then you do a backward calculation from there that, and those are generally long-term targets, and that's a very, very important one. So without government intervention, without government push, it's very difficult to convert.
And in the frame of government, but also your expertise in this sector, would you support India should set a zero target, or would you think that this is not yet the time?
I would say, we need to have short, medium and long and very long-term targets. A net zero target would be a very long-term target. It would take us a long time to get there.
Can you play just how long? 2070?
No, that's too far off. That's too far off.
For this matter,
yeah. So that's I wouldn't go that far. There's too many things that are happening. That's too far off. I would go much closer to this thing, not 50 years away. It's difficult to say. It's difficult to say. This is too arbitrary a question to say. By which time should you be completely net zero? I would say, if we look at step at a time. Let's say, when should we really start looking at electric two-wheelers, for example, being a prevalent thing? I would say probably about 2027 or so, which is only 6 years from now. That gives us enough time to start preparing the infrastructure and everything. The other form of vehicles thereafter. It could be 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, or wherever thereafter. More complex because infrastructural requirements are different, etc. Public transport and two-wheelers will probably come in first, then followed by the other forms of the vehicle. So like I said, break it up. Then the next target is when you convert the entire market, and then is net zero after that. So it's difficult to give an arbitrary figure to say that, by such time we should be net zero. It's just, that's too much in the air at this point. There's more work which is required to come to that kind of a conclusion.
Thank you very much, and thank you in particular for all your efforts, because I also live in Delhi, and as you mentioned in your speech, we can all, or we all deserve some better air, and so this is the particular point where I treasure your efforts very much, and wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you for having me.